What is going on, gunfighters? Welcome to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about gunfighting the right way, with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. Now, you look at some of the greatest gunfighting and warrior cultures throughout history, they're also known for hunting and hunting culture. They seem very separate a lot of times today in our tactical Molly, multicam, black rifle world versus the classic blued steel, walnut, and mossy oak, real tree, camo pattern of the year, whatever it might happen to be, world. They seem to be very different. But I would like to blur those lines. I would like to see more of both. I would see more hunters into the defensive and tactical guns, and I would like to see more tactical shooters getting into this gun culture 2.0 with the black rifles and the Glock 19s, getting into hunting, putting food on the table, protecting and providing for, whether times are good or bad. And part of that is literally putting meat on the table. And part of that is hunting. I would like to see more of a crossover. If you're only into black rifles, maybe you'll still enjoy this episode. Eastern hunting rifles, because I realized I did a Western hunting rifles episode and even a gear episode, but most people live east of the Mississippi. What about those hunting rifles? Let's do an episode about that. Anyway, with that, if you want to support the podcast, hopefully you'll consider becoming a patron. They get some cool insider content and some stuff only available to patrons. They also get the opportunity to be part of a really good Patreon chat. I am blessed and humbled to be a part of and learn a lot from those men. We help each other. Iron sharpens iron. Mostly because you want to support the podcast. So Patreon, if you want to support and you don't want to give money, that is fine. I would ask you to make sure you've liked, subscribed, and hit some stars, and then share a podcast, whether this one or Alpha Male Podcast or Simple Man Sermons, with somebody you think they'll like it. There's podcasts, all kinds of stuff, from deep theological stuff to just fun knife episodes. Share one with somebody you think would enjoy it. Anyway, with that, I'm going to plug in the bio, and then we'll get into the main topic. So, who am I? Who is this person talking to you from across the internet? Why should you listen? First and foremost, I am a Christian, a servant of God, and a follower of Jesus Christ. God has blessed me to do many things in my life, for I could do nothing apart from Him. U.S. Marine Corps combat veteran, did a couple of tours in Iraq. As an assaultman after my combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. Also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Also did several years in law enforcement, LAPD. I worked regular assignments and more specialized assignments. Been a private contractor for a 3-letter government agency. That's all I'll say about that. Been blessed to be a state rifle and pistol champion and West Coast Regional Rifle Champion. Won more shooting competitions with the talent that God's given me than I can actually remember. Was blessed to be the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area. Our primary job, the reason we primarily existed, was to stop active shooters. I got the opportunity to head up and be the commander of that team. I grew up around guns, hunting and shooting and competing at a very early age. Been blessed to hunt all over this beautiful country, from whitetail on the East Coast to mule deer on the West Coast, and bear and elk and all manner of things. I've even been a professional big game hunter and guide. But again, most importantly, I'm a Christian. And I am your host, Michael Milito. Welcome to the podcast. Eastern hunting rifles. Now, let me get nostalgic on you. Let me wax nostalgic. I grew up a poor boy in the South hunting. And in general, in the South, it can be quite hard to hunt if you're not part of the landed gentry, if you don't have access to private land. And being the bastard son of a single teenage mother in a small town, also being Italian, which was a rare thing there, did not really grant me a lot of easy access to private land. There's not a lot of public land around there, so you got to be creative. That's how I learned to hunt. So I want you to know I have experience. I grew up doing that. I grew up putting meat on the table quite literally. Grew up hunting in the backwoods, mostly Virginia, some in Maryland. I honestly can't remember when I started because some of my earliest memories are with guns and shooting living creatures. I know that I took my first bear with a bow. I think I was 16, I may have been 15, I may have been 17. Just to give you some idea of my hunting background there. I'm very much acquainted with the eastern, I should say the rural southern, southeastern hunting style. So with the New England pockets of hunting style. And there's a rich heritage in the east, both in the south and in the north, of hunting. And if hitherto foremen you have not been a hunter, remember this. In most of Europe in like the Middle Ages, hunting was for like the landed gentry. It was for the rich. It was for the wealthy. Commoner didn't have access to guns or hunting, I don't think. The average, peasant in rural England in the 1600s was not hunting. But when they came to America, when they landed here in Jamestown or in the Pilgrim colonies, they learned to hunt and put meat on the table. They had to learn something they didn't know. They went out and did it. They hacked out a way in the wilderness. You can too. You can get into it. Whether you live in Massachusetts or Connecticut or Georgia, you've been blessed with an amazing ability as a hunter. You're the most dangerous killing machine on the planet. So maybe you want to tap into that and unleash it. Now let's talk about Eastern hunting. Primarily when you think Eastern hunting, you generally think of sitting in a tree stand or a saddle stand. I did this quite a bit growing up because a lot of times you're limited to small chunks of land. It certainly is effective. It certainly is popular. Saddle hunting, it's often referred to. I'll be honest, it's not my favorite way to hunt. I will do it. Sometimes it is the most effective way to hunt. And if my goal is to put food on the table, I'll do it whatever is legal and most effective. So stand hunting comes to mind. Also, you can spot and stalk and still hunt. I did it growing up even though I didn't really know the name for it because I hunted a lot of really nasty areas, swamps and really thick briars and just nasty country because again I was poor and I hunted where I could. I remember saving up money and buying an old, I honestly can't remember how much I paid for it, but the fact that I paid anything for it is astounding because it had like 4 holes in this old beat up fiberglass canoe. It was cracked in a bunch of different places. Went down to an auto parts store, figured out how to do it, and made fiberglass patches and patched up this old canoe. Looked like a banana. It was an old like yellow fiberglass canoe. I camoed it, and that allowed me to get into a lot of really obscure country. Even for a fairly populated area, there's just places a lot of people didn't go. And in general, a little pro tip if you're poor or don't have access to private land, usually public waterways. If it's navigable, meaning you can get a vessel down it, then it's usually considered public. Check that for wherever you are, but if you can get up a creek or something and it's navigable, then it should be public access. A lot of places you look at maps, they'll have little, right on the borders of these creeks and rivers, there'll be public access. If it's really nasty, swampy country, a lot of times, a lot of hunters won't hunt there. And guess where a lot of big bucks and stuff go when they're highly pressured in these easier to hunt areas? In the nasty areas. The real thick, dense stuff. The stuff that you look at and think, I don't even think a deer can get in there. Oh, trust me, they can get in there. If you're man enough to get in there too, you might just be able to put some meat on the table. So, spot and stalk hunting definitely can be done in the East. And I've got a whole other episode, I don't know if it'll come out before this or after this, on drive hunts. Drive hunts, some of the few places they're still a cultural thing where they're legal and popular is in the East. There are a couple of eastern states, I think Pennsylvania, where drive hunting is allowed. And drive hunting, I would submit, is one of the most primitive and rewarding and good bonding, hunting experiences that you can do. And if you want to get into hunting and drive hunting is legal in your area, you don't even need a gun. Maybe just go ask the people, if you know somebody that's into it, and say, hey, can I just go help and be a driver? I don't even need to carry a gun. I'll just wear some orange so I don't get shot, and I'll go where you tell me to go and do what you tell me to do, and just be part of the experience. So drive hunting is also popular. So when we talk about Eastern hunting guns and cartridges, just know that it's more than just, sitting in a deer stand. There's more to it. There's a rich heritage there. Also, when we talk about Eastern hunting, I know there are exceptions. There are big woods up in Maine. I lived in New Hampshire, the live free or die state, for a while. Professional firearms instructor up there, and would often go up to Maine. And I know there are exceptions. You can get into some pretty big woods country and some pretty sparse country up there, and you can even get into moose, and they've reintroduced elk in places in Kentucky. But those are the exceptions. Generally, when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about white-tailed deer, right? When you think about hunting east of the Mississippi, you generally think about white-tailed deer. So that's mostly what I'm going to talk about, white-tailed deer in these different kind of hunting scenarios. So just keep that in mind. There are some exceptions, and you're generally talking real thick, dense vegetation. Greenbriers and cypress swamps or palmetto forests or dense deciduous or pine forests. It strikes me, I'm east of the Mississippi now, but for large chunks of my life I live west of the Mississippi, and I really like it out there. And I'm often struck when I come back, I'm like, it's so green and it's like a jungle, because compared to out west, which is very sparse most places as far as vegetation goes, and there are exceptions to that too, like the Oregon coast, which is literally a rainforest, but most places out west you're talking about big open country. Often struck coming back east at how thick and dense it is. That's the kind of habitat we're talking about mostly. And I know a lot of people are gear junkies and they're like, you're over 10 minutes into this and you haven't even talked about a single specific rifle or cartridge yet. You're right, I haven't. So let's get into it. Classic, iconic. You're going to hunt off a stand east of the Mississippi. Saddle hunt. Bolt action 308. Bolt action 308. It's great. We'll do tons of other hunting too. You can certainly hunt out west with it. But a bolt action 308. The ammunition is cheap. It's available. It's capable. I am east of the Mississippi. Every time I go to Walmart, I am struck by how much 308 ammo there is. The fact that I can go to Walmart and get ammo is a plus. There are a ton of good bolt action 308s. If I'm recommending one, I must have to recommend the one that I have probably, right? Or I would have a different one. Kimber Hunter 308. If you decide you want to do some other kind of hunt with it, a drive hunt or a spot and stalk hunt, you certainly can. It is lightweight. It's lighter than a lot of other rifles. A lot lighter than most rifles in its class. But it's still good. They still have that sub 1 MOA guarantee. They are not crazy expensive. They are not a budget rifle. But the Kimber Hunter in 308, phenomenal. It's got a good controlled round feed action, which I like. I prefer controlled round feed. If you don't know what that is, they did a whole episode on push feed versus controlled round feed. Push feeds are a little bit cheaper to manufacture, and they can, let's say in general, push feeds may be a little bit more accurate. However, a controlled round feed gives you positive control, or it should if it works correctly, positive control of that cartridge from the time it strips off the magazine to the time it goes into the chamber and extracting it. I like that. I also like the classic 3-position safety. This is basically the same action and safety and everything, scaled down with modern metallurgy to be a little bit lighter and sleeker than the pre-64 Winchester, which is known as like the rifleman's rifle. It's great. It's controlled round feed. It's got that great safety. You can either completely lock the action if you're going through some thick, nasty country like some Greenbrier and you're literally trying to crawl over it to get to a spot, so that action doesn't open and drop a cartridge or be halfway open when you go to shoot something. Or you can put it in a half position so you can unload it and everything with the gun on safe. And you can hit it with your thumb as you're coming up to do a snapshot. It's a fantastic design. It's my number one pick for a lot of reasons. So you're going to hunt east of the Mississippi in a stand, bolt action 308 Kimber Hunter. If you want the more classic you can get a good Winchester. And Winchester for a long time went to the cheaper route of a push feed. Now they've gone back to the traditional controlled round feed. And you can get a good Winchester controlled round feed rifle, the Winchester Model 70. However, it's not American made. I like Winchester, I like their product, but those rifles are made overseas. The Kimber rifles are made in America. So if that matters to you, go the Kimber route. But if you want the more classic, well, Kimber makes one called the Classic. You could get that one too. But if you want a Winchester, they are also good. Remington Model 70 is the other big one, but their quality control and their bankruptcy lately and everything, I can't really recommend them. If you find an older one that you like and you're happy with it, go with it. I should also touch on 30-06. It's a great cartridge. In a lot of ways, it is better and superior to a 308, but I think hunting whitetail deer from 25 to 300 yards, the 308 will do pretty much everything that you want it to, hunting whitetail inside 300 yards. There are some applications where I prefer or would prefer 30-06. Again, for this, 308, it's a great choice. There are a lot of other really good choices. Now let's say you want a little bit longer shot, because longer shots do exist hunting east of the Mississippi. If you are part of that landed gentry or have a good connection to somebody that does, or growing up, I hunted quite a bit in salt marshes, where if you get an elevated position, if you can climb a pine tree, you can see a long way on those salt marshes. I grew up hunting with a shotgun east of the Mississippi, because that's what I had for a long, long time. Long shots do exist. If you want that longer shot capability, you can go it kind of bifurcates. You want the classic theology on that, where I want a very flat shooting cartridge with a max point blank range. So whether that deer is at 45 yards or 325 yards, I can put the reticle in the good kill zone of that deer and pull the trigger and expect it to hit somewhere in that kill zone. Then you're talking about a classic flat shooting cartridge. Some of these would be 25-06, known for that. Great choice. 25-06 with proper bullet construction, it's plenty for deer. 25-06 is a good cartridge. If you're talking about the new school of thought, you don't really care about a flat trajectory because you're going to hunt with a computer and it's going to do a lot of that work for you. You're going to laser range find the animal and dial on a big massive scope. Clicks and bells and whistles and computers and all that. You want a predictable cartridge that bucks the wind well. Kind of why the 6.5 Creedmoor exists and why it has become so popular. I really can't recommend anything more than that. There are a lot of really good new modern long-range cartridges. But if you're talking about white-tailed deer, east of the Mississippi, a good long-range cartridge, there's really no reason. If you just want something else, you certainly can get like the 7mm PRC. But if you talk about economy, it's readily available ammo. It's not super expensive. You can literally get it at Walmart. Most of the 6.5 ammo, I shouldn't say most of it, a lot of the 6.5 ammo, because I don't know if I could quantify that. A lot of the 6.5 ammo comes already made to be a long range, high ballistic coefficient, all that stuff. So if that's what you're doing, 6.5 Creedmoor, a good choice for this. Savage. Savages are known for being crazy accurate. They're good rifles. There's a ton of different models. If you're hunting out of a stand, you got your stand at the corner of a field and you've got hundreds of yards in each direction, you really don't need a light rifle. Might as well go with a heavier contour barrel rifle. If you're going to be shooting inside a blind, stay away from muzzle brakes. Just a little pro tip there. But really, weight, you're not going to be hiking long distances with this thing, probably, so don't worry about the weight. But if you want like the best bang for your buck, Savage makes a lot of really good long-range rifles that don't cost a ton of money. There's a lot of really good expensive long-range rifles, but I think Savage is where to look for that. And I get no kickbacks, no brand affiliation here. I take no bribes. This podcast is primarily supported, is a blessing by God, number one, and it's supported by viewers like you. So I'm not telling you this because they sponsor me or some garbage like that. I don't want to be the kind of man that takes a bribe and then tells you to buy something because somebody paid me to. Also, going with a budget option, Savage Axis. Savage Axis is a great choice. You can't afford that Kimber Hunter and you still want to go out and have a good bolt-action 308 rifle to put meat on the table, Savage Axis in 308. A lot of them come with a 3-9 scope. It's not my preferred scope, but it'll get you going. So if you want the budget option, that'd be her. Savage Axis 308. Now let's talk about some other Eastern hunting, that spot and stalk hunting. Two rifles really come to mind for this. The first one is one that's not made anymore, but there's a lot of them around, and that is going to be the Remington 760 pump action rifle. They're fast, they're handy, but the 760 is a phenomenal rifle. It's just like, I shouldn't say just like, it's similar to the Remington 870 classic pump action shotgun, but in a rifle. Quick handling, quick pointing, if it fits you well, and they fit me really well. They are a great option. I think they're most common in 30-06. You can also get them in 308. If you're talking about spot and stalk or drive hunting, a lot of times you may be taking a fleeting shot as opposed to a stand hunt where a lot of times you can wait for that broadside shot, or you're shooting through stuff. The 30-06 does give you a benefit when you bump up to bigger, heavier bullets. Get a 30-06 and like a Remington 760, you go 180 grains or higher. 180, 200, 220 grain bullets, phenomenal for that. It comes in other calibers too. The 760 came in a lot. 35 Whelen. You were wanting to hunt some of those bigger East Coast animals, or you just want a 35 Whelen. They came in 35 Whelen. But the 760, quick handling, quick pointing, fast follow-up shots. Because some states make you hunt with like shotguns or straight-walled cartridges. But anywhere that allows like bottlenecked cartridge hunting, they probably allow the 760. Now, the other real big one that comes to mind for spot and stalk hunting, hunting out of a canoe, still hunting, that kind of more dynamic hunting, drive hunts. It's a classic. It's been a classic for a long time. And that is the Marlin 336. And Marlin had some troubles too. It was bought by Remington. Unfortunately, they got caught up in that debacle. But they were bought by Ruger, which I was delighted to see because I'm a fan of Ruger. They have issues like any company, but in general, they do really well on quality control and things like that. Maybe my favorite thing out of SHOT Show this year, 2023, was not some new whiz-bang super laser mega blaster with, thermal sights. It was that they were re-releasing the Marlin 336. The Marlin 336 is quintessential American. That design came out in 1948. Now, Marlin had older versions of lever-action rifles before that, but it has decades of putting meat on the table. It is a phenomenal rifle. This kind of Eastern hunting. And I really love the Winchesters. If I'm being honest, I think the Winchesters with the iron sights are faster handling. They're a sleeker design. They're definitely better for like a saddle carbine, I think. However, the 336, because of its flat top design and side eject and solid bolt handle, I think really has an advantage in mounting modern optics. So if I'm talking a preference for a lever action hunting rifle east of Mississippi for this kind of hunting, encompassing all that, the Marlin 336, it's quintessentially chambered in 30-30, and 30-30 is a great choice for whitetail deer hunting from, again, 25 to 300 yards. It's a great choice. Also a really cool choice and one of my personal favorites, the 35 Remington. I don't think they're re-releasing it in 35 Remington. Hopefully they do in the future. But they made them for a long time. A lot of times they're underappreciated. There are small pockets in the U.S. where they're pretty common and popular, but a lot of people maybe have never even seen one in person, especially out west. As living out west for a long time, they're pretty rare there. But certain pockets, I would imagine, Pennsylvania, little New England pockets, they have this reputation. I think they're a phenomenal choice for drive hunting, especially, again, those steep angling away shots or angling two shots or just thick, dense cover shots. 35 Remington, if you want something a little bit different, it's worth mentioning. It's a cool cartridge. If you want just the most effective, quintessential, 30-30 is awesome. It's this great balance where it's got enough power. We think of it as a short-range cartridge today, but when it was introduced in the 1800s, it was kind of revolutionary for being a flat-shooting cartridge, I think. And if you're talking about the kind of hunting we're talking about, being able to shoot pretty flatly out to 200 yards is more than enough. Again, unless you have access to somebody's private land in a bean field, shooting farther than that east of the Mississippi is really rare. Maybe you get on like a power line cutout where they've cut down the underbrush for power lines or whatever, and you get a long shot that way. Or again, out on the salt marshes. But really, that's an oddball scenario. Most of the time, you're inside 200 yards. And the 30-30, although you might give up a little bit of range over like a 308 for a quick handling lever action carbine like that, and deep woods hunting and spot and stalk hunting, canoe hunting, they're great. So if we're talking about that kind of hunting, you may want to look there. I should talk about some other subsections. There are states that require straight walled and all kinds of other regulations. I'm not really going to go into that because I'm not an expert on that. I've never hunted with those. Then hunting with like a 44 Magnum, which I did just because I wanted to. I've done a lot of handgun hunting. I'm not going to go into that in this episode. I love handgun hunting. I like it for the challenge. But if you're doing that, you probably know what you want to do with that. I've done a whole other episode on that. So that's its own thing. For youth, if I was looking at a good youth rifle, if you're talking about that kind of spot and stalk and still hunting we were talking about, or drive hunts, I would really look at that same lever action gun in 357 Magnum. You can practice with it and shoot a bunch in 38 Special. The recoil is going to be very mild as long as you make sure it's still zeroed. You can get a good purpose-built hunting 357 load. Not the same as a defensive handgun load. Different things, different velocities, different philosophies of use. But a good 158 grain jacketed soft point, traditionally known for being really good. Something like that for a youth hunter and that kind of hunt would be fantastic. When I say youth, I'm talking about pretty young youth. If you're talking, some 12-year-olds can be pretty beefy, pretty tall, pretty stocky. If they can handle a 30-30 or something else, or a 308 already, just go that route. But even as a grown man, there's nothing wrong with hunting with a nice lever action 357 Magnum. I think that's awesome. Also, the 243, it's one of my favorite deer hunting cartridges. I've taken a lot of deer, and I think just coincidentally, because it's what I had, every single elk I've ever taken has been with a 243. Also, when I was blessed to be able to guide my wife on her first sheep hunt, and she took her first sheep, 243. Don't think that you need more. The 243 is a fantastic round. Good for youth. It's also good for all kinds of hunting. It's a great all-around deer hunting cartridge. Maybe one of the best. But if you're stepping down, you want to look at something like the 243. Phenomenal and plenty for deer. So youth recommendations, I'm going to go with that. Youth budget recommendation, probably no surprise, Savage Axis in 243. Now let's talk about the more modern route. AR-15s are super popular. Maybe that's all you have and you want to go put meat on the table. I do not think that an AR-15 and 5.56 223 is the best or even a good hunting rifle. I would say it's adequate and it will do the job. If you're going to do this, I did a whole episode on hunting with the AR-15. You may want to go back and give that some of your time. But if you're doing this, bullet selection is really critical. Don't be going out there with your 55 grain full metal jacket. Somebody, I'm sure, will be like, oh, I've shot deer with 55 grain full metal jacket. And okay, that doesn't really prove anything. There was a American serviceman in Iraq, I believe, and I think it was substantiated, that killed a man with an MRE spoon. That doesn't mean I think you should get rid of your guns and have an MRE spoon by your bedside for home defense. Right? You make do with what you have, but it's not a good choice. He killed a man with an MRE spoon because he had to. Cause it was either that or he was going to die. You could shoot a deer with a 55 grain full metal jacket, or even some other thing. Plenty of deer have been killed with a 22. It's not the right tool for the job. If you're going to hunt deer with a 5.56 223 AR, really pay attention to bullet selection. I would recommend something like a soft point 64 grain or heavier. The 77 grains, something like that, has some proven reputation for hunting in that caliber. I also want to look at the mono metal bullets, the monolithic solid copper bullets, especially in something that small. because they tend to keep their integrity, stay in one piece, and penetrate pretty deeply. You're already kind of, in my opinion, on the marginal side for deer with a 223 5.56. If you want to hunt with AR, you certainly can. If you want to bump it up in caliber, I would really recommend looking at the 6.8. Of all the other calibers you can get an AR in, I think 6.8 is probably one of the most common besides 5.56 223. 6.8 has a reputation for being a good medium game hunting caliber. There are a lot of other calibers, but really I'd say stick with those two unless there's something else you really want. If you really want to hunt deer with a 458 Bushmaster, go for it. But those are my two recommendations. Really good bullet selection with an AR 5.56 because that's what you have, or going with the 6.8. Now you can easily bump it up to the AR-10 platform, and then you get 308, so you're good to go. So if you're in this Gun Culture 2.0 black rifle, and that's all you have, and you want to get into hunting and putting meat on the table, you don't have to go out and spend a ton of money. But before you go all tactical out and think you need to build your specialty AR, if you're going to go out and build a whole nother AR for hunting, look at what that's going to cost you, even just for an upper and an optic, versus getting a purpose-built good deer hunting rifle, which would be that Savage Axis and 308. You're not fighting Charlie in the trees in Nam. Love ARs. I love them. I was training with mine yesterday. I've certainly hunted with it. But except for very special circumstances, you're probably better off with a purpose-built bolt-action or lever-action hunting rifle. Let's talk about optics. You don't really need any. Irons work fine. If you can find a rifle that still comes with irons, that's fantastic. We talked about that Marlin 336 still comes with iron sights. Fantastic. I applaud you if you hunt with iron sights. Also, there's nothing heretical about mounting red dots. Red dots can work quite well for the kind of hunting we talked about. Brush hunting, spot and stalk hunting, still hunting. I think, a 336 30-30 with a red dot mounted on top would be a fantastic kind of drive hunt, spot and stalk hunt kind of kit. I think a little bit better choice would be an LPVO. I really like hunting with LPVOs. Even out west, the majority of my hunting rifles have LPVOs on them. Low power variable optics, like 1 or 1.5 to whatever. Because I can dial it down, I can shoot those jump shots, those running animal shots, or I can dial them up and get a little bit longer shot. You may be thinking one of those 1 to 8s or 1 to 10s or whatever, and I've tried that route on a hunting rifle. To me, they're just kind of obese and ungainly, and they really throw off the balance of the rifle. I quickly took them off. I like the Leopold, and again, I get no brand sponsorship, but Leopold low power variable optics with the 1-inch tube. Not the tactical super giant pig ones. I'm talking about classic 1-inch tube low power variable optics. VX Freedom, that's a good middle of the road, not a cheap optic, but a good quality and really good optic. And a lot of people, quintessentially, the classic scope, the variable optics 3 to 9, that's fine. And like I said, if that's what comes on your rifle or if that's what you want, that'll work. I would prefer a 2 to 7 over 3 to 9. And don't discount the old fixed power scopes. When I say old, I don't mean like actually go buy an antique one. There's a lot better glass today than there was decades ago. A good fixed power scope. They're usually much simpler, especially with the amount of lenses and stuff inside. So you can a lot of times get a really good and robust optic for cheaper because it's fixed power. Talking about a lot of those rifles, a fixed 4 or a fixed 2.5 is a fantastic choice. A lot of people, in my experience, miss more animals when I was professionally guiding because they had way too much magnification. I don't think I ever ran into a scenario where they couldn't make a shot because they didn't have enough magnification. Think about this. In the Marine Corps qualified expert, I shot at man-sized targets with iron sights at 500 yards. Consistent hits. Iron sights, 0 magnification. If you're somewhere east of the Mississippi and you can't hit a deer with 4 power scope, it's probably not because you didn't have enough magnification. It's probably because you don't know what you're doing. I'm just being honest. It's probably because you lack fieldcraft or marksmanship ability. A 4 power is plenty, I think. And there's exceptions. If you're going to hunt bean fields and shoot really, really long shots and dial in all your dope and all that stuff, that's a different kind of scope and setup altogether. And I touched on that. For your general purpose hunting, you may also want to look at a fixed 4, a fixed 2.5. I think they're really good, simple options. And now I'm going to talk about what I think is the best, most quintessential Eastern hunting combo, a 12 gauge, shotgun. Why? Because there's more things out there than just deer. If your goal is to put meat on the table, like it was for me growing up, a shotgun has the most versatility and utility. If you want to talk about the best crossover gun, period, the most versatile gun, period, you can defend your family with and put meat on the table in all manner of circumstances, it's a shotgun. The 308 is a very good, versatile bolt-action rifle for whitetail deer. You know what it's not great for? Waterfowl hunting, or legal for that matter, or turkey hunting, or sandhill crane, depending on where you are, or upland birds, quail, and dove, and all those things. You talk about meat on a table, snow geese in a lot of places has a very liberal limit, and snow geese are a pretty big animal. It doesn't take a lot of those stacked up to equal the meat weight of a deer. When you can go out and kill, let's say, 15 a day, if that's the limit. And the 12 gauge will let you do that. So if you're getting into hunting and you want a utilitarian tool, with a buckshot, I like number 4 if you can hunt with it. Double aught is kind of a standard. And just a slug, in general, a good Foster style slug out of just a smoothbore barrel. If you apply the fundamentals right, that's a 150 yard deer cartridge. And it gives you all the flexibility of hunting anything else that you want to hunt. It'll kill anything in North America, from a mourning dove to a grizzly bear. If you want utilitarian putting meat on the table, anywhere, especially east of the Mississippi, shotgun. Talking about dual purpose defense, I think reasonable rate of fire, and Maverick 88, Mossberg 500, 590, great choices. Sure you put the plug in there, because there's some fish and game laws where you gotta kind of halfway neuter your shotgun, but that's for a different thing. If you want the most economical, the budget version, just get a break open single shot. A lot of places you can get them at Walmart for under $150, but the 12 gauge really is unrivaled, and it's killed plenty of deer, and I still love to hunt with one. In fact, the biggest bear I ever took, I took with a 12 gauge, and I was purposely hunting for bear. I was out west, but it was really thick manzanita. If you don't know what like a manzanita patch is, it's really thick, dense cover. I could have taken a rifle. I chose to take my 12 gauge shotgun with number 4 buck. Why? Best tool for the job. It's very capable, the 12 gauge. It is devastating at close ranges. If you're going to be hunting inside 150 yards anyway, because that's the terrain and public land you're going to hunt, you want an all-around hunting implement, you may look at that. You can go 20 gauge, nothing wrong with a 20 gauge. You're talking economy of scale and availability of ammo and all that stuff. Really, 12 gauge is kind of settled. Anyway, some thoughts on Eastern hunting guns and cartridges. With that, men, I want to say thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this content, either because you got good information out of it, I hope, you find it entertaining, and you just want something good and clean to listen to that's not full of blasphemy and politics and a bunch of other stuff. Foul language where you can sit down and listen to and not feel bad about it. If you want to support the message, it's supported by viewers like you. Consider becoming a patron. There should be a link in the show notes. With that, tactical tip and then the tactical verse of the day. Tactical tip of the day, dry fire. Once you get your rifle zeroed off a bench, unless you intend in hunting off a bench, like you're going to hunt in a ground blind and you have a bench set up in there. Most people don't hunt off a bench. Don't just practice off a bench. And a lot of this, once your gun is zeroed again, you can do it dry fire. Print out or buy a deer target, set it up at an appropriate distance, and practice shots akin to what you're going to encounter in the field. Now, you can never perfectly duplicate it, right? You can get a lot more familiar with it. Talking about drive hunting, practice walking and then all of a sudden do a snapshot and shoot at that deer. If you're talking about still hunting, maybe practice getting a hasty rest on a tree trunk. Making that L shape with your hand on the trunk and using your thumb as a rest. Practice that. Practice shooting from the kneeling. Practice with a hasty sling. If you don't know how to get a good sling technique and make that aid in your accuracy and work on natural point of aim, you can do all that dry fire. It doesn't really cost you anything, and no, it's not going to hurt your rifle unless you have some really old rimfire 22 or something. You should be just fine dry firing. Whether it's U.S. Marine grunts, infantrymen, or champion competition shooters, or any like top level gunfighter, one thing we have in common, we dry fire. And you can do the same thing with hunting. And practice similar scenarios and what you intend to encounter. One that's often overlooked in today's tactical world is the sitting position, but it can be quite good for hunting still. I cut my teeth in precision rifle competition. That's how I got started in competition shooting. It used to be 4 position. They took out sitting. But I think for hunting, for a lot of this kind of hunting, it can be quite practical. You are spot and stalk hunting and you get in an area and you want to transition to still hunting and say, ooh, I think there's deer here. I just, my intellect and God-given ability as a hunter tells me there's probably a deer somewhere around here. I'm going to sit because it's comfortable and I can see over the grass. Know how to shoot from that sitting position. Again, dry fire will aid with all of this. So dry fire in those common field positions. Anyway, with that, let's get into the tactical verses of the day. If I say, my foot slips, your mercy, O Lord, will hold me up. In the multitude of my anxieties within me, your comfort delights my soul. Also, O Lord, to whom vengeance belongs, O God, to whom vengeance belongs, shine forth. Rise up, O Judge of the earth. Render punishment to the proud. Lord, how long will the wicked triumph? With that, men, thanks for listening and have a blessed day.